Joining us now, Chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia, John Whitbeck, and taking exception to a piece in the Washington Post yesterday written by Laura Vazella, who's normally pretty clean on this stuff, but Laura using 6 anonymous sources in describing what is going on in the Gillespie campaign. I'm not in a position to dispute any of it. I was not in any of these meetings. I was personally quoted in the article 2 times. What she said that I said was 100% accurate. So I can say that much. But joining us now to break it down, Republican Party of Virginia Chairman John Whitbeck. John, good to have you with us, man.
Hey, John, how are you?
Never better. I want to thank you for joining us at such short notice. Vazella, in her article, basically criticizing the Gillespie campaign and how it's being run now. I have not, first of all, when I read the piece, I mean, I'm in D.C. today. I'm in D.C. 2 weeks a month at least, and I talk to all these people. I just have to say, on the record, John, I have heard no one in the White House or at the RNC complain about the way the Gillespie campaign is being run. No one. And, they talk to me. Obviously, they ask me, do you think Ed can win? What do you think the issues are? But no one has come to me and said, we don't like the campaign. Is it in trouble? Blah, blah, blah. We don't like their manager. What happened with Stewart? I think everybody understands that. So no one asked me that. Second thing I want to say is in this piece, there were 16 quotes, all of them anonymously, 16 anonymous quotes. And she said she had 6 sources. And she talks about a meeting, John. I want to get your full take on this. I just want to set it up. She talks about a meeting at the White House. First of all, the meeting was off the record, so whoever leaked it broke that trust. But then she's got 6 people that are anonymous feeding her information. I can't verify any of this. What do you make of the whole thing, John Whitbeck?
Well, look, let me tell you something, John. I'm really upset about this. And let me tell you where I'm coming from. I'm somebody who has briefed the president and the vice president on this race in the Oval Office. I'm on the leadership team that oversaw the transition between our RNC chair, Reince Priebus, over to Ronna McDaniel. I'm the chairman of the Republican Party of Virginia. I'm the head of Team Virginia. I know the ground game. I know what's going on in the campaign. I'm intimately familiar. I talk to Ed Gillespie just about every day. I talk to his staff. So if anybody knows what's going on in this stuff, it's me. And let me tell you something. This fake news article is absolutely unbelievable. The notion that the RNC is taking charge of the Gillespie campaign is just absolutely false. It's fake news. The RNC is supplementing the Gillespie juggernaut of a campaign and also the Team Virginia juggernaut that we have, as RPV right now to do what we need to do to win this race. And I don't know who these quote unquote Republicans are that are talking, but they're cowards. If they're actually Republicans who are not willing to put their name on the record, they're cowards. And I went on the record on this story 2 days ago, actually yesterday, before it came out, for more than 30 minutes. Actually 2 days ago, for more than 30 minutes. I talked about my meeting in the Oval Office. I talked about everything that's gone on, that I know, and all the RNC interaction with this campaign. I talked about everything. Went on the record, had the courage to tell them the truth about what went on, and gave my name, unlike these so-called Republican sources here. And they didn't quote me one bit. Now, I don't want my name in the paper because I get my name in the paper all the time. It's not about that. It's about getting the truth out there. And they didn't say one thing. They wanted to do a hit piece on Ed Gillespie, and they found enough cowardly so-called Republican leakers to create 16 anonymous quotes. And that's their story. This is an outrage. The American people have been screaming about this, and conservatives have been screaming about this for years. And this is the latest example of the liberal mainstream media doing a hit on Republicans, and we can't stand for it.
Okay, so let's get into this, John. You're alleging here, making the accusation that the article is false, basically, right? It's false.
There is no question that very, very, very false statements have been made in this article. There's certainly things that are accurate in the article. I'm not going to say the entire article is false, but there are a lot of parts of this article that just are absolutely not true. For example, I was at that meeting that's referenced here where Virginia party activists lit into Chris Levitt for nearly losing the primary. Okay, think about that language, lit into Chris Levitt. That's not true. That's completely false. I was there. I was sitting right there. We were all sitting there having a constructive discussion by Virginia Republican leaders saying, hey, here's some of the things we see in Hampton Roads. Here's some of the things we see in Northern Virginia. Here's some of the things that we see going on in the Richmond area. Here's some of the things in Southwest. Here's some suggestions we have for what we see on the ground. That was the purpose of the meeting, was to brief the White House political staff and the campaign about what we're seeing. And to say that they lit into Chris Levitt is fake news. It didn't happen.
So, from your perspective, why then, if this didn't happen, what was Laura Vizela's objective?
Well, I don't know. I've known Laura for a long time. She always is pretty fair with us. I think there's an editor at the Washington Post that decided to cut and paste her story and take out the parts from people like me who are in the know and put in the fake news, fake sources, cowardly, don't give your name sources, and to create a hit piece, to create the opportunity for them to make it sound like the Gillespie campaign is in disarray and everybody's divided in order to help Ralph Northam win the election. And that's it. That's the objective there. And it's an objective that I find to be repugnant, because we need to know really who these editors are and why they're doing this and what their background is. For all we know, they could be, former Hillary Clinton staffers. We don't know. We just don't know anything about them. The editors never put their name out there. It's always the reporters that put their name on these bylines. But it's really unbelievable what's happening. And, one of the things I want to note, Sean Spicer went on the record for this quote as a spokesman for the RNC for the White House. And the RNC also, members of the RNC went on the record, and they didn't quote anything about, other than a little blurb about Sean Spicer. They didn't quote anything about, the actual people that know what they're talking about. Sean Spicer particularly, about where the White House stands in this and where the White House feels about this race and how confident they are in winning this race and how much help they're going to give us to win this race. But it didn't fit the story. It didn't fit the narrative they wanted to create with the story, and so they didn't put it in. Just like my truthful, straightforward, guy who's in the room account of what happened in all these meetings didn't make the story because it didn't fit the narrative.
So Laura Vizela says in her piece, by the way, just so everybody knows the title of it, in case you want to look it up in the Washington Post, it's Gillespie's primary scare has White House others urging Trump world hires. And I'm one of those people, and I was quoted in the article, by the way, as saying truthfully that I actually called Ed Gillespie up myself and suggested several names for him to call and get involved, because I didn't think he connected with Trump voters on June 13th, and I'm not sure he's connecting with it now. But here's a piece of her article. Vizela says these are six people that she's anonymously quoting, a mix of Richmond and Washington political operatives and party insiders spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive campaign matters. First of all, let me just ask you this, and I know you said it was a cowardly act, but, I mean, to get six people in a meeting and they don't want to give their name, and then they want to talk about what went on in a confidential meeting that you agreed to come to it because it was off the record, and then you leak it and then give your name. I mean, right there, doesn't that raise flags for anybody?
Absolutely.
John?
I mean, if you're a reporter for a major newspaper like the Washington Post and a person is not willing to go on the record, and look, this isn't anything new. The New York Times does this, MSNBC does this, CNN does this, and the Washington Post does this. They get a collection of people that are not willing to give their name, and they go and they won't go on the record, and they say anonymous sources say, or sources close to the president, or sources close to the governor, or sources close to Gillespie say blah blah blah, and this is what they do. This is the modern version of news, and
fake news.
You're right. A quality reporter would go, look, if you're not willing to go on the record and give your name, one, you're a coward. Two, I don't think you're credible because you're trying to push some personal agenda, and I'm not going to be part of it. But that's not how they work anymore. They want to destroy the Republican Party. They disdain the Republican Party. They disdain people like Ed Gillespie, conservative Republicans with a long history of service to their state and to their country. They disdain that. They want us to lose, and they're using their bullhorn in the media to be able to do it. And it's really tragic for the American people. It really is.
Let me just read you here one paragraph, which is probably the one I took exception to the most because I know it's not true. It says, and this again by Laura Vizella, who, by the way, I think is one of the best out there, so I'm not sure where this was coming from. But Laura said, the White House has offered to dispatch Trump family members to stump for Gillespie. But so far he has not accepted, according to one Republican familiar with the discussions. I can say right off the bat that is absolutely not true. And she asked me that on the record. And I said, look, I talk to the family members all the time. There's been no invitation. There's been no request. And he just was the nominee. And I'm sure as we get into the campaign, that'll come forward at a later date. But to my knowledge, it's not like Eric Trump, called Chris Levitt and said, can I do a campaign appearance for your nominee? I mean, that's just not true. So maybe it was mentioned briefly, but look, I can tell you right now, I would have been aware of any of this had it happened because they would have called me up and asked me what was going on. So I'm not sure, John, where that was coming from. And so when I saw that, I'm like, okay, this is just meant to really discredit this candidate. So I was a little surprised by that. Now, the other stuff, the stuff where she's quoting people is accurate. I mean, that was nailed. I mean, Corey Lewandowski's name came up. He would have helped. I mean, we did bring up his name. They rejected it. We brought up Mike Rubino. They rejected that. I get it. But that was true. But as far as family members coming, that's not accurate. But, to have 6 unnamed people in a confidential meeting that was off the record, that no one has the courage to give their name. This is the other thing. I mean, no one that's on the record confirmed any of this. So I have no idea. A lot of these people have their own agenda here, John, and I'm kind of surprised it got in there, to be honest with you.
Yeah, me too. And I really, like I said before, it's a tragedy. Look, here's the deal. The Ed Gillespie campaign made a gamble in the primary to not attack a fellow Republican or 2 fellow Republicans and try to get through it with as much money in the bank as they possibly could, which they ended up with $2 million, $3 million if you count the RGA donation that came right after the primary. And walks into this race with all the resources needed, which was one of the big problems we had in 2013, lack of resources, being outspent, and creates the largest ground game we've ever seen. The RNC decides to go all in, which they weren't in 2013. All in. They're putting the same number of people on the ground we had in 2016 and 2017. The RGA has already spent millions of dollars on this race. Team Virginia had 11 people on the ground before the primary working around. Now we're going to up that as many as we possibly can. Hopefully up to about 50 is what we're trying to do. You have Jill Vogel and John Adams, 2 fantastic candidates, and you have the most extreme left Democrat ticket ever nominated in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The Attorney General has declared himself the leader of the resistance, and in Virginia, Ralph Northam is the most extreme candidate ever. He wants to raise the minimum wage. He wants to give driver's license to illegal immigrants. That's the state of this race, and there's nothing the Washington Post can do to turn that narrative. The truth will always prevail in these races because Virginia voters know better. And the Washington Post is going to continue to do this. That's fine. We're going to call them out, just like the president calls out all the fake news that he has to deal with every day.
Well, 6 anonymous sources with 16 quotes from a meeting that was off the record. It's a little bit of a stretch. I mean, if I was, I've been in the editing business a long time, as you know, with major daily newspapers, I would have never let that story go. Not with that. I would have to have somebody confirming that on the record. So I don't know where they were going with that, John, but I know you got to take off. But I got to ask you one question. Corey Stewart today announcing that he's going to run for U.S. Senate in 2018, making an early statement. I mean, here it is, July of 2017. Normal if there's not a race, a statewide race, but a little out of the box because we still have a governor, a lieutenant governor, attorney general, and 100 House of delegate races up for election or re-election. A good move, bad move, and do you have any opinion on it either way?
Well, it's about the time that everybody started announcing for 2017. I mean, as long as Corey does what he should do and helps the ticket win in 2017 before we get to 2018, I have no issue with it. But look, if you're going to run for Senate against Tim Kaine, you're going to have to get started early. So the smart ones are the ones that get out early, and Corey's just doing the smart thing and getting ready to go. But we really appreciate. I mean, one of the bright spots in the Washington Post article was Corey Stewart saying, "I hope Ed wins." They could have. Corey could have used it as a forum to trash Ed like he's done in the past, but he didn't do it because Corey's now wants to help us win this race, win in 2017, and then he's going to move on to 2018 and run for Senate, and we'll see what happens.
Corey Stewart announcing for U.S. Senate today, 2018. Right now, he goes in as a prohibitive favorite. He's the front runner, and I know there's other candidates getting in. E.W. Jackson, maybe Nick Freitas, he might reconsider one way or the other. Definitely Carly Fiorina, so that's going to be an epic battle. But right now, Stewart, based on the momentum he got in this primary, no question, he is going to go in as the front runner right now. John, we're out of time. I know you got to take off. Thanks for being with us. John Whitbeck, Chairman, Republican Party of Virginia.